Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 12th episode at Ruby India. Ruby India brings together curated content from and for the Ruby Indian community and friends. We do a regular newsletter highlighting content from the people in the community. One of the aims is to highlight people and their work, which has also led us to the start with the podcast. Today, we have two special guests with us. One is Smith Shah, who is from Bangalore, and we have Terence with us, who is joining us from Austin, Texas, who was visiting recently for RubyConf India. Both of them are associated with the Bundler core team, and I think they'll introduce a bit about themselves to start with. So, any of you could go ahead, I guess.
Go ahead, Terence.
Hi, I'm Terence. I come from Austin, Texas, and I work at Heroku running Ruby things. So if you're listening and at any point you deploy any Ruby applications to Heroku, you're running code that I've written. So also if you're running into problems, then it's probably also my fault. So there's that. And then I guess semi-recently, but I joined the Ruby core team back in November of 2013. So been on it a little over a year now, doing security and a few other things.
Sure. So, hey, so this is Smith. I'm from Bangalore. I currently work at Flipkart. I'm I'm on their infra team. I guess I started contributing to Bundler in 2013 or 2013 or so, and right now I'm on the Bundler core team. Till very recently I used to maintain the dependency resolver, and recently I've started contributing a bit to JRuby 9000. So
Nice.
that's it.
And how did both of you get started with Ruby? Like, what was your first job, and how did you get started with Ruby?
Yeah, so I feel like this is a story similar to at least some of the older people that I've met in the Ruby community, but I was doing some web development when I was in university doing PHP, and I also was doing Perl, but not related to web development. And when I guess like this was when Rails first started becoming more popular. This was like around the 0.910 days. There was this hype around, at least this early hype around Rails, and having done some like spaghetti PHP code, I figured there was something better. And so I started looking into Ruby. So I picked up Ruby first before looking at Rails because I wanted to have a clear distinction between, I guess, like where the language starts and ends versus like where the framework starts and ends. And I ended up using it a bunch to do shell scripting when I was doing sysadmin work on a bunch of old Solaris boxes for one of the departments at university.
Right.
Sure. So, like Terence, I got involved with web applications in college. I think it was my DBMS class where we had to do something with the LAMP stack that got me interested. So I, again, like him, started with PHP as the first thing. But luckily, I got into C42 in my end of my third year. So my first job itself was in Ruby, and luckily there, because of Ruby Monk, the entire focus was on Ruby, not Rails.
Right.
So typically, what happens is that people start with Rails, and I mean they have some misconception. They believe about Rails, so that didn't happen to me, and I guess ever since then I've been doing Ruby. So yeah, that's
Nice. Terence, when did you start working professionally with Ruby?
I started working professionally in Ruby about around 6-ish years ago. I went from uni to grad school, so it was after that. And my first job, I was working at a startup out in Austin, where I live now, and it was an email startup called Inbox. And it was when I started working, Bundler was not a thing. So it was like the pre-Bundler days. And I kind of remember, like, the first day of work, you spend the whole day trying to get the application running on your machine. And I don't, this isn't like a thing that I think people do nowadays, but you used to have to list all your gems in your like Rail, in the config application RB file, or whatever the Rails 2 configuration file was. And you had these like config.gem lines, and then you'd run rake install. But then I remember that you couldn't put all of your gems in the config.gem. Like certain binaries didn't work properly if you put them in there because you need them to be installed in the proper place. And so then you'd have to ask like one of your coworkers what versions of like RSpec and Cucumber, which you're using on the project, they were using, because backwards compatibility was also like Semvern stuff was not as prominent as it is today. And so like different versions, you use a different version of Cucumber, like all the tests would fail. And so I think we've come a long way since I've started working in Ruby.
Nice. And how, like, when did you start working with Heroku?
I started working actually in Heroku about almost 5 years ago. It will be 5 years at the end of this month. So it was pre-acquisition back in 2010, if I do my math right. And actually, I was doing consulting before Heroku, and Blake Mizrahi, the creative Sinatra, who was working at one of the early employees of Heroku and was working there, came to Austin to do a presentation about just deploying stuff on Heroku. And after that, I wandered a bunch of time doing like AWS DevOps work at the time for a client project. So over one of the holiday breaks, I basically ported our application on Heroku on their free tier to just basically see if we could get it up and running. And it's kind of funny because the first time I saw Heroku was the RailsConf earlier that year in 2010. It was the one in Las Vegas, my first RailsConf. I remember seeing their booth, and I remember thinking at the time, like, why would anyone pay for this? Like, this thing is like the dumbest thing ever. And so it's funny how things worked out in the end.
Right. And how about you, Smith? Like, you're working right now with Flipkart.
So right now I'm working with Flipkart, but like I mentioned before, so I started with C42. Back when I started, I think Rails 3.1 had just come out, and Michael Harder's guide to Rails, he just updated to 3.1. I think that's where I started with, and luckily, I guess from my fourth year when I was doing the internship, I think I've been writing Rails, and unlike Terence, a lot of things were in place for me. So it was a very pleasant experience to, programming Rails, like Bundler and all of those things were.
Wait, what Rails version?
3.1.
3.1?
3.1, yes.
So you had the ACID pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. I'm saying like there were good times back then. So that was that. I guess I worked with C42 for a year, and I guess it was after that I went to Flipkart, and I think it's at Flipkart that I really got involved in Ruby open source. I think part of it was that Flipkart was facing scaling issues that most startups who are using Ruby, or most companies who are using Ruby, don't generally face. So that was a very interesting experience about, that I think that kind of forced me to look deeper into Ruby, how things work, and like the GC and other things about it. So yeah, and I think yes, and I guess that's where actually I also got involved into Bundler, which is very funny because the way I got involved into it is like there was one of the interviews I was sharing with a senior developer, and she asked like, how do you implement a cron job? And that was one of the questions she asked. And I think the end of it, I thought like, do I have any questions like that? And I got curious, like, how does bundler do its dependency resolving? And it's through that, like just that curiosity that I read about it, and then I found out that it was recursive and it had some issues. So yeah, so that's about that. And I guess yeah, since then I've been doing Ruby. Till recently, I moved to a few other things, but still, in my free time, I'm still pretty much involved with the Ruby community.
And what are different things like? What are different things regarding like related to Ruby, which interest you guys or you currently work on? Any interesting things, like any projects that you're working on or something like that?
Yeah, so I guess recently I've been interested in, I mean, I feel like if you're a Ruby web developer, you deal with JavaScript at the end of the day, and it's not something you can really avoid. So recently I went to EmberConf in Portland, and obviously through Bundler and stuff, I have some history with Yehuda, who is heavily involved in that project. And Yehuda and Tom have been talking to me about Ember for a while now, like a few years for sure. And I think I've been trying to avoid dealing with JavaScript. I don't find it as pleasant to, I guess, program in as I do with Ruby. I feel like I've been spoiled both with like the toolchain ecosystem that has matured. Like we've come a long way since I first started, like I was mentioning in my story of my first job. But I like JavaScript definitely has a bunch of, it has moved a really long way since when I first started doing web development, even inside of Rails. But so recently I've been playing around with Ember, but I'm definitely interested in mostly like the Ember fast boot stuff. So if you aren't familiar, fast boot is this thing in Ember that they kind of announced at the EmberConf keynote, where basically you can boot up a node process and you can run the same client code that you're running on the browser on the server to essentially send the initial payload or dump since DOM rendering is considered one of the most expensive parts of client-side JavaScript.
Right.
In addition to that, you
like
SEO and other things with that. Right?
For isomorphic views.
Didn't catch it. Oh, can you repeat it?
I meant isomorphic views. I think that's what you're speaking about.
Yeah, I think so. Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Right.
So yeah, like I guess in my case, recently I've been working much more on JRuby these days, and I think I personally think JRuby is the most exciting project to be working on right now. JRuby already, like the things that are coming out with MRI 3.0, like concurrency, JIT, those things JRuby already supports it. And but the new IR, which is coming out with JRuby 9000, yes, the recent the first version which is going to come out, it's going to be about the same performance as the previous version, not as much in improvement in that department, but it will be compatible with Ruby 2.2. That's what I and but the thing is, after that, it's endless. Like there could be a lot of optimizations there, and I think the most exciting thing in JRuby is Truffle. Truffle is this research project which is sponsored by Oracle. I think it's the AST framework, and it will replace whatever IR runtime that's currently there. But the performance results right now indicate that Truffle JRuby is faster than any other Ruby implementation out there, even PyPy or anything that's there. So I think the Topaz is the one so that is something really exciting. So like if you are interested in anything like compilers or language or something like that, I think JRuby is a really good project to get involved with.
Next that we have lined up is, so Smith, you mentioned you started working with Bundler. In same way, Terence, how did you get started with open source projects or contributing to open source?
So I think with open source, actually, Ruby wasn't like Ruby community wasn't my first community that I actually got involved with. I think I was very lucky to be part of KDE, which was the first open source community that I worked with. Luckily, Conf KDE, which was Conf KDE India, the first time it happened ever happened at my college, and luckily just under my department. So I got involved with them. That was truly one of the, if I would say, life-changing moments for me, because after I got involved there, I realized that there's a lot of interesting things people are doing, like a lot of hard problems they are solving, and it has like a lot of the theory that you learn in college. There was like application to it, and so I started with KDE. Specifically, I started working on a project called Nipomuk, which I think very recently they removed it. They replaced it with something called Balu, and so I started there. It was challenging. It was a fairly challenging project, but it taught me a lot about open source and how it actually takes a long period of time and investment to to do significant contributions. So yeah, so I got there. So when I contributed to Bundler, because of my past experience with KD,
Wow.
I think I really had a advantage over there, because this was the second time I was getting involved with open source. So yeah.
And how about you, Terence?
So the first open source project that I got involved with was actually the Pivotal Tracker gem, just because we were using, I pushed for Pivotal Tracker at the consultancy I was working for in Austin. We're using a lot, and I kind of wanted to build some CLI workflows from it, and so I started contributing some features and stuff, and those pull requests got merged, and that was kind of my first taste of it. But it wasn't. I don't think the Pivotal Tracker gem was ever super widely popular in the same way Bundler is. Obviously, my involvement with Bundler was actually kind of funny, at least for getting commit fit. So at that time, I was working at Heroku, and I was in charge of. I was kind of leading the charge for the Bundler experience, like on Heroku. And if you weren't around for the 0.9 days, it was a pretty rough time for using Bundler. So Smith didn't actually get to experience this fun stuff. But I was actually not a customer of Heroku initially when we were using Bundler, when we migrated our app over, and Heroku had some basically like experimental support for it. And pretty much like every version of Bundler, like when you upgraded, broke your application. So it was super painful. Like basically it would fix a bunch of bugs, but then there would be like new bugs introduced, but it was like specific to your application and stuff. And it was super painful. But I'm glad we went through that, and like we got Bundler 1.0 out. So when I joined Heroku, having gone through that, I wanted the Bundler experience to be much better, and I cared about reducing that kind of pain for our customers. And I ended up interacting with Carl and Yehuda when they're developing stuff in 0.9, just because I cared about the experience on Heroku. And then basically when they were wrapping up their Bundler work and Engineer, and they were leaving to go to Strobe, was the startup that they left to go for. Carl was like, you should commit to Bundler, get more involved. And I think within a week or something of him saying that, he literally just gave me commitment to the project. And at that time, I had never cloned the project or like looked at it at all, and I had commitment to it. So it's this joke that Carl and I have, that it's basically this long like the super launch role that he got me involved with the bundling project by just giving me commitment. So yeah, I mean, since then, like I think the first thing I worked on was getting. I think the build was failing at the time, and I basically like helped like make the build pass, and it actually took me a long time to get comfortable with the project.
Nice. Right. And we had a lot of questions coming from people about bundlers, so this would be a good time to discuss about that. So one of them was, to get a brief update about bundler first of all, and then about what all different. I think there were some changes in algorithms and all to get an idea of what all different things go around in bundler in terms of algorithms and also in terms of resolver, because that has been something which has been hot for a while.
Sure. With the bundler resolver, I guess the most recent change, the 1. Bundler 1.9 version that got released, the dependency resolving algorithm has once again changed. What happened was that Stripe open source initiative, if you recall, which happened, I think, sometime around September last year. So one of the project which was called Coca Pods, the guy, so in that project, the idea was that whatever the bundler resolver was, it would be benefit many more gems if it was extracted out of it and made a common gem or something like that could be used by others. So so that was the project that was accepted into the Stripes program. The guy who worked on it was called Samuel Giddens. Big shout out to him. So he took the bundlers dependency, decoupled it, and first he integrated with the Coca Pods. The gem is called Molonilo. And then finally, once we saw that things were fine with Coca Pods, we merged it with Bundler, and right now it's running both Bundler and Coca Pods. I think things are
Ruby gems too.
And there's a pull request. I think it's still not merged. It will probably replace Ruby Gems version as well. So that is the most recent algorithm change with Bundler, and yeah, so that's there. And I guess now the entire focus on Bundler is to move to the new index format.
That's plugins as well.
And yeah, so I mean, there's also plugins and a few other things, but I think the biggest thing that's there is the new index format. But if that dependency resolver also gets merged with Ruby Gems, I guess that also moves towards the merge with Bundler and Ruby Gems, which is something that was called out, I think, it's always been a year, I think, about that. So yeah, so I think that's there. But yes, the new next focus is going to be on the new.
Nice. Just to get an idea, like what are the different things involved around bundler ecosystem? So there's a resolver, or what are different algorithms are involved? Let's say if someone does bundle install, what are different things are involved as components?
Okay. So I think so basically what happens when you do bundle install, like the very first time, like you just clone the repo and you did bundle install, and what it does is, and say let's for for simplification, there's no gemfile.log, like you don't have it, like and in this case, what's going to happen, the very first thing what it will do is it'll talk to the bundler API server. So you see that source at rubygems.org, which actually is a reverse proxy to the bundler API, which is hosted on Heroku, which is something we maintain. So it talks to that. Yeah, so there's a caveat though. I think it depends on your gem file. So basically, we talk to this server. If your gem file is small enough, like so yeah, I'll tell about what happens if the gem file is big. So basically, we talk to the API server. We get all the information. So basically, for each gem, we get all of its dependency, all of its dependency information.
Yeah, so the API server basically, so this is actually one of the things that I did when I first joined the Bundler project. We introduced the API support in Bundler 1.1. So I guess some preface is that before the API endpoint, there was this thing called the modern index formats, which I think at this point isn't very modern, but it pretty much contained a Marshall dump of an array of tuples in Ruby that for every single gem version platform, it contained the gem name, the version, and basically the platform, and had like every single one, the whole ecosystem inside a Marshall dump. And then, so when you pulled the format down, you would basically initially, you would download it and then load it into memory, and then you would have the list of all the gems. But you still had to actually also download the gem spec file because for each gem, that is where the dependency information was. So so the way Bundler, I guess like to continue Smith's thing, the way Bundler works is it basically prepares a large graph solution of what is potentially the resolve for your gem file, and then it goes and winnows it down, right? So the initial modern index format, it would load everything in the ecosystem, and then you'd have to basically go through and fetch the dependencies in the gem spec files for every single gem that you were interested in looking at. And so the optimization with the API was if you can pass it a list of gems, then we will return basically first level dependencies for that specific gem. So the API server won't do the resolve for you, but it will speed it up because now you don't have to load into memory the whole graph of every single gem that is possible, but only basically ones that are scoped to your gem file. So it significantly reduces the total graph size. And
I guess
and what all different things does Ruby Gems do in this whole process?
In this process, I guess it's pretty much. It's like it's pretty much bundler. Like the only thing I guess Ruby Gems is used to get the gem spec information, so bundler can use it while like resolving the gem file. I guess that.
Well, we make a bunch of, so when we get the API information, we actually create like fake gem specs for the gem, and then basically it makes it so like if we need more information, it knows how to fetch the actual gem spec to fill in the rest of the information if we need it. But Ruby Gems mostly in Bundler is used for the gem, basically for actually installing the gem locally on disk, which is actually probably the slowest part of when you run bundle install, the slowest part of actually running it. Like I think people think it's the resolver and other things, but in actuality, when you're installing any decent sized gem file, the gem install is actually the slowest part.
Yeah.
And you know, this is like Ruby Gems' fault. Like if you're compiling Nokogiri, like that takes time, right? Like Nokogiri forces you to compile libxml2 as well as like libxsl2 and all that stuff.
Everyone sees that with Nokogiri. That's true.
And I guess I would just quickly add that. So something that came up with the Bundler 1.5. Yes, but Bundler 1.5, what we did is we parallelized the downloading process. So that is much faster. So entire bundle install, if you do use parallel install, is much faster if you don't do it. Like I think today it mostly parallelizes the gems downloading part, but yeah, so like compilation and all those things are still single threaded because there's like those things you cannot parallelize.
There's some non-threads. Like, well, it's not even like thread safe. It's like context safe things. Like we initially did it at MRI, and I think we basically reverted because we ran into some subtle issues, and it kind of like it would install gem information in the wrong directory. You know, it's kind of bad.
Sure. So yeah, today I guess it just parallelizes the downloads with Bundler 1.9 if you're using.
Right. Next up, we have question about what are different tools do you use for your day-to-day programming, and what kind of setup do you use, like what editor you use, or um, do you use GitHub, and these kind of things. Like what is your day-to-day coding look like?
Yeah, sure. So I have a history and a background in, like I was saying, doing sysadmin stuff when I was learning Ruby. And that means I learned how to use VI and learned how to use Screen. So even to this day, I use Screen still instead of Tmux just because that's what I'm familiar with. And I just haven't had a huge incentive to switch, and I use VI over Emacs or Sublime or anything because, like, when you're SSHing into a box, like, those are basically the two tools that are pre-standardized on any Linux distribution. So if you are SSHing into anything, like, you can make sure to have those things. Like, I use Screen for multiplexing and all that stuff, and basically do command line development with regards to that. Unlike Aaron Patterson, I prefer RSpec over Minitest for testing. And also, I mean, obviously I use GitHub, but on Ruby core, we're still on Subversion, so I actually also use Subversion, which I guess isn't in the toolbox for many Ruby developers. And yeah, and then for browsing, I prefer Firefox. So I use Firefox both on my phone and on my desktop.
Nice.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah. So in my case, I guess my editor of choice would be Vim. I started with Gary Bernard's Vim config, and I guess I still have most of his. Like, now it's changed throughout the years, but I still use it whenever I'm doing Ruby related stuff. I guess I do use IntelliJ with cursive if I'm doing something like Clojure, or maybe in some cases in JRuby I use IntelliJ because it's Java. So that's what I use. I guess when it comes to command line, I do make use of Screen. I use it for pretty much what Terence said. And besides the...
You don't Tmux?
No, I mean, I haven't done much of remote pairing, so I haven't really run into that. But yeah, besides that, I guess I guess I really want to share about the command line things that I use. So I think over the years, I've been become a huge fan of Silver Searcher, AG. I think that's the command line.
Right.
Yeah, that has really it's really fast. That's one. The other thing I really use is Z, which is like jumping between projects. Like, I can't imagine how I would be able to do that. And I guess, and finally Git, because like Terence, even when I started with KD, it was moving from Subversion to Git, so I have never dealt with the pain of Subversion. So I guess, yes, I do make use of GitHub. And finally, my browser of choice would be Chrome, because I guess it's just because I've been using it for so long. I've like a lot of extensions, a lot of things. So, and what I really like about it is, like, if once I just sign in using my Google account, my Gmail account, it has all my settings configuration, and I just really like that. So yeah, so that's my setup.
Yeah.
I
I was just gonna say, I find the VI, I guess, extensions add-ons better in Firefox, which is a big reason I haven't switched over.
Sure.
Like, Vimperador is simply better than Vimium or anything else that's out on Chrome. And I guess with regards to tools as well, unlike most Ruby developers I know, I run a 2011 ThinkPad. And ThinkPad from 2011, I get made fun of a lot for having such an old laptop, and B, having not a Mac. So I run Linux on that.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I missed out on one question which should have come previously, was about your experiences with the Ruby community. So experiences in the sense like what are different, how was your experiences regarding meetups or meeting different people, getting involved with different things like you, in case of Terence, you're involved with Rails Girls and such events.
Uh,
I think we can start with Terence.
Yeah, so I mean, I really got involved in the Ruby community. Like, I went to meetups at Austin on Rails, which we had locally in Austin when I first moved there 6-ish years ago. And I remember going, it was only like 15, 20 people like a week. And I think nowadays we're all the way up to like 100. I don't go nearly as often. A big part of that is just because I'm not in town, but I do like how the format we have now is it's once a month, and basically it's 2 talks every month, and one of them is a beginner focused talk, and one of them is a intermediate advanced talk. So we have kind of a talk catered towards new people in the community, and then also for a talk for people that aren't so new, and then we just have socialization practices, as we like to call them, afterwards. So I think for people who would get bored of the beginning stuff, you can just kind of come halfway through and not have to kind of be a part of that, but then we can all come together. And I think that's like a nice format to get people to mingle. I've heard a lot of complaints of just like people get bored because you're not interested in the content or the talks anymore. So I think that's a good way to mitigate that. And with regards to Rails Girls, Rails Girls was, I feel like a lot of things in my experience in the Ruby community was an accident, and Rails Girls was also a complete accident. So I was actually on my way to Railsbury, and Josh Calderemus from Travis CI, I'm good friends with him, and he told me that I had to come visit him in Berlin, where Travis was headquartered. And I was traveling from Paris because I was doing some Salesforce event stuff there. And so I basically cut kind of my Paris trip short. I was going to go to a Python conference in southern France, so I ended up not. And then I went to Berlin, and Josh gave like some of the best directions I've ever heard. So like I have Verizon as a cell phone provider in the US, and they only have CDMA network. And at the time, I didn't have a phone that had like GSM or anything, basically, that the rest of the world besides Japan and the US use. And so like I'm traveling to Berlin with basically no way to get in contact with anyone. And I get off the plane, and so these are directions Josh gives me. He says, when you get off the plane, you'll take a train bus thing to this stop, and then from there you can take a train to this thing. I don't remember the actual names. And then from there you can walk to the building that we're at, and you can give me a call. And I told them about my cell phone situation, and I'm probably paraphrasing, but I remember him saying, "You're a smart guy. You can figure out how to get up to the top floor." So those were like his directions for me getting to this place. And so, I was just visiting him at the time. And so after like 30 minutes of like figuring out that there was actually a back stairwell and I could make my way up there and there was an elevator, I eventually made it to the top floor where the Travis CI office was. And I found there was like all these girls like in the office. And I was like totally confused because like I don't remember Travis CI having that many female employees at the time, or really like any. And I was like super confused. And then Josh, like when I found Josh, he was like, "Oh, put your stuff down. Like this is me after traveling like a whole I don't know, a few hours or whatever." He's like, "Come help these girls install Rails." So that was kind of like my first exposure to Rails Girls, and it was totally by accident. I had no idea that it was happening in the office, and I ended up getting involved for that workshop that day. Like that was like the install fest we had the night before, and then the next day I was originally planning on going sightseeing, but since I basically bummed food off them the night before, I felt kind of bad about like just ditching them for free food. And so I ended up just like helping. Like I got actually assigned a group, and I had no idea that I was being assigned a group to mentor. But I did get assigned a group, and I ended up just staying. It was was a lot of fun. It was good to see kind of just like the energy of these women who were basically giving up their Saturday, right, to come and learn how
Right.
to and do this stuff. And it was nice to see people who were excited and passionate about like learning whether they were going to continue doing it or not, or had any idea of what to expect, right? So since then, I helped with open sourcing the guides that that Rails Girls uses, and have gone on to give talks. And I think I've been to 12 or 13 Rails Girls workshops in my I guess 4 years of being involved. So it's been a pretty awesome experience and rewarding with regards to that.
And for Smith, like, how was your experiences with the Bangalore? I think you started with in Bangalore, right? So
Yes.
maybe about
Again, so basically, I guess I was pretty lucky to start with C42, which was very involved with the Ruby community. So I think yes, I did attend Brugg. But Brugg was one of the first things that I attended, and that kind of got involved with the community. It was about one of the pro bono projects that we were doing at C42 for Ashoka, and that was something we presented a talk on it, and we got a lot of feedback, and it made me realize that the Ruby community is fairly large, and there are many companies who are involved with it. But I think for me, the biggest turning point was actually attending RubyConf India Pune, which was something that helped me a lot. I think at that time,
this was 2012.
Yeah, 2012. 2012,
Right.
I think. Yeah. So I think that was one of the really big turning points. That time I remember going through all of the talks, and everything was really new for me. There were some really interesting talks that I remember from then. Like, one was about sandboxing, and I remember Charles also gave a talk about JRuby and things like that. So that was a huge learning opportunity for me, and I think and that kind of got me involved there. Like, I started following up about Ruby community, reading about them, but yeah, and I think RubyConf India 2013, when I think that was one of my favorite all-time favorite cons, and that was because I was 1 year into Ruby at that period, and like, I was in a complete newbie. Like, I knew a decent amount Ruby, and I think that is like a very sweet spot to go attend a conference. So I could follow a lot of content, and I could really relate to it. Like, I could, like, someone would suggest that how do you, like, Richard Sheems at the time, I think, had a really good talk about how he goes through about debugging, and those were and I think there's one talk about how Unicorn web server, pre-forking web server, how to create one, which talked about a lot about Unicorn. So those were really good talks. Because I used Unicorn on one of the projects back then, and so I could relate to it a lot more. And I guess since then I've been been hooked. Like, yeah, since then I've been coming to almost all of the RubyConf India. So I think I've been this was my fourth RubyConf India. Yeah, this was my fourth RubyConf India. Like, so yeah.
And you also go to different events in Bangalore, like you have code retreats and so.
So
some other events like that.
So I think in regards with code retreat, I went to the global code retreat done by Corey Hens at ThoughtWorks. That was really useful, especially that time I was still in college, and in college you don't really write maintainable code, so it was a big eye opener for me that like I haven't that I like I didn't know. Oh, basically, I mean, there we had a class called object oriented design, and I realized that that class was completely wasted. Like I didn't learn a single thing. So yeah, that was that. The other events, I would say with Bangalore is like apart from the Prague, I guess I've been also been going to the Garden City RubyCon, which has been happening for the past 2 years.
That's cool.
And 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 yeah, and so I mean, being in Bangalore is good that way that there are other conferences that also happen. So I've been going to those as well. Some of the HasGeek conferences, and yeah. So yeah. So those are something. There. So that's it.
We are coming to an end of our questions, and so this is something that we like to ask everyone about, is to get an idea of what all different things does your company use for things like communication or workflow or day-to-day, even for day-to-day programming. What are different tools do you use to make your work easier, and what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, so I guess to give a background a little bit, Heroku's engineering team, I think at this point is about 40% remote. So a lot of the tools and stuff we use have to cater towards a good remote culture, or else it kind of just won't work. I know there's a lot of other tech companies that kind of get away with not having that, even though they're kind of halfway there with just naturally with the tools that we have. I mean, so like we don't have any mandates on editors and kind of that for like what you have to use. With regards to pairing, we use Teammate, which is a fork of Tmux. And it just makes it basically, they make it super easy to, if you're not familiar, it makes it super easy to set up a pairing session. So you just run Teammate on your machine locally, and it's set up where you're running in that local directory that the person who's hosting it is from. And then it provides a SSH link that you can then just give to the other person or other people that you want to pair with. And then you have a working Tmux session with, or at least a somewhat stripped down Tmux session, but it's like pretty easy. It's pretty painless to set up, right? And then so we have that, and then we use Google Hangouts basically for chat, like voice and video. And then if we have to do any browser stuff, the person hosting just shares their screen on the browser. And so that's kind of how that setup has worked out fairly well for us, and isn't like as high bandwidth as using something like Screen Hero oftentimes. And with regards to other tools, we use Trello pretty heavily for a bunch of, like, I guess, coordinating and syncing on kind of various teams and projects across the company. And we actually have on my team, my manager uses Asana for kind of keeping track of like more fine-grained, like weekly to-do tasks. Because she's on a bunch of different projects she has to manage, so we use that there. Though I don't think Asana is necessarily super widely used in the company outside of her. And we have, since Heroku is actually like, we're over 200 people now, and I remember joining when we were 17 people. So we've grown a lot, but like one of the things that has happened is like you can't really have as much of a flat structure and stuff, and it's kind of like one of the hard pieces, basically integration and alignment. And so there's this thing that Salesforce does. I don't know if I would. It's a tool, but it's not like a programmatic tool. It's kind of just an idea. But basically, we have this thing called V2MOM, and it stands for visions, values, measures, obstacles, or methods, obstacles, and measures.
And what's the tool? Sorry.
It's just like, it's an idea more than like a programmatic tool or like a program. And the idea behind it is basically it helps with kind of team, like individual team and company alignment. So the idea is that like the head of the company will write a V2 mom for kind of the company and work with like the exec board and other people to come up with a thing. And so basically, as a individual, you can read it and get a sense of like what we're trying to achieve this year, right? And like kind of the vision of the company, what are the methods and things that we're going to do to achieve it, and what are kind of the major obstacles that we see. And it's a very broad scope thing. And then eventually, like your team below that will then have a V2 mom for like your manager, and then individuals will also have like V2 moms, and basically they will reference the V2 mom above them. And in addition to that, you also have like specific things for yourself individually. Like you might have things that don't necessarily pertain to the company-wide vision. But one of the nice things about this is that across the company, like if I have a meeting with you, for instance, and I have no idea really who you are, I can pull up your V2 mom in the company directory and kind of get a sense of like, what are the missions and goals and things that are important to you, and like what you're trying to achieve this year, right? It can make like being go smoother because I'll have an idea of like what you're trying to get out of it, and vice versa, right? Like potentially if you called me in for a meeting to ask me for some help on something, like I can help cater that in a way that is more useful to you.
You work along with the Matt's Ruby team, right?
Yes. Well, I work with them. I don't necessarily talk to them every day, but like they partake. We use HipChat for our chatting tool, and there's a Matt specific Ruby room that basically is 100% in Japanese. But we also have a general Ruby room where Koichi and Nobu hang out in. And so if I or anyone in Heroku kind of has general questions about stuff that like we need help with, we can reach out to them, and they're fairly responsive about stuff. So it has been very useful to have them on the team for either prioritizing or fixing issues for customers and whatnot.
And you also what are the different things you use for like say CI or
so we
for your
processes? I guess we use Travis for CI. We use the enterprise Travis thing with the private stuff. And anything that's open source, we just use the open source Travis tooling. With regards to specific projects, Travis doesn't necessarily work for kind of our larger integration stuff. So we have our own testing framework for that, that kind of exercises and tests the whole system. And we host all of our infrastructure on AWS. There's a foundations team that basically builds a bunch of tooling and infrastructure around that to make it really simple for us to spin up the particular instances and things we need to basically get that up and running if we need to test a specific piece with respect to the rest of the infrastructure, right? So we have this concept called the dev cloud, and it will basically boot up a mini Heroku of every single instance type that you need to test like your particular component in it.
Got it. And how about you, Smith?
I guess like at Flipkart, I guess like remote work. I mean, like once or twice a week, or maybe depending on the situation, maybe for a few weeks, I think it's fine. I personally don't know anyone doing 100% remote at least in my team, but that might be because of the work we do, like the infrastructure we do, that kind of requires us to be at the same place, and so that might be there. But as far as I know, like taking time to do remote work, like nobody minds that. Because of the size of Flipkart, there are like different tools. Like at least when it comes to communication, there are like different tools, and most teams have something they've agreed upon to use. So basically, groups, mail, G-Talk, Hangout. Those are the very common things. Like that is, I think, common across entire Flipkart. But in our case, in our team, for example, we do make use of Slack for general communication, like talking and chatting about something. We have a Slack room.
Okay.
We also use IRC. Now I think with Slack it has the users had declined, but we had a pretty active IRC channel which we use from time to time. So uh, that's in regard with communication. I guess email is still the dominant communication form, or the very old trusty phone call still works at Flipkart pretty well. So
Really?
yeah.
The server is down. Come up online.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, yeah. So those kind of things are. I'm sure even Hiroko would have it, but yes, I mean on
Phone
call.
calls?
Yeah.
They don't work as well when you have international people.
Oh.
That doesn't scale as well. Kind of more expensive.
That's a good. That's a very good excuse, right?
Yeah, I mean, we basically use Hangouts, so like we'll like we have Google Apps stuff for our org, and so we just do Hangout calls for our one-on-one meetings, any team meetings. You can add it to your calendar, basically. Can we do that?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, yeah, we also make use of heavily use of Google calendars, like for invites and setting up meetings and all.
Time zones are so nice. Well, I guess you don't have to deal with that, but for us, it's just like it's nice to be able to like set a thing and be like, I don't have to think about like the time zone. Like Google will figure that out for me.
So yeah, and like yes, there is like on-call phone, and yes, so phone calls are still very important at Flipkart. So that's what.
You guys use PagerDuty or anything? We use PagerDuty at Heroku.
No.
Pages for on-call.
So I mean, we do have our own set of Nagios and those kind of alerts we set, but that means based on the based on the escalation levels, there's an escalation metrics. But yes, we don't use PagerDuty or anything out of the box solution.
Right. How's the workflow for development?
What
different things do you use for that?
What different tools we use for? Okay. So one thing.
Your CI or GitHub or something like that. Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, at Flipkart, I guess majority of folks still we use GitHub. I guess GitHub Enterprise. I guess that is what we majorly use. The second for say ticket bugs, there's for we use Jira for development. At least in my old team, Jira was what we used to plan sprints. That was what we used, and for a major release, say that there's like a very major or a very new service. In case of those, we had a Bugzilla kind of a thing for Flipkart. Like inside of it, we made use of that. But I think now Jira has become the unified thing. Like it's being used almost across the organization. For CI, we have our own Jenkins setup that we make use of, which runs tests and does things. And I guess yes, and common things like there's a staging environment. Depending again, this is again depending on the team. Or there's a staging environment where based on what feature is going live, we would do automated testing. But if it's a significant feature, it's very new. In that case, there will be QA. We still make heavily use of QAs there, and yes, and then there's a pre-prod, and then finally production as well. One interesting,
You're working on. You're also working on physical infrastructure, right? Not just the infrastructure.
Sure.
You're supposed to work on that, right?
Yeah. In my case, yes, the team that I'm part of, there's part of the team that actually also works on the physical infrastructure of it. That I'm not working directly on. Yes, they handle the data center setup, figuring out what say some machine went down or there's some issues with it, they are like building systems that can keep track of it, like this is from this track or it's located here, this is where the problem is. There could be network connectivity issue, bandwidth issues. So those kind of things they manage that. And like I also mentioned, yes, we also we have our own alert service, and we also rely heavily on Nagios to get around in case of emergencies or outages.
Sorry. We're running out of time, so we just have one. We'll just take one question from Twitter. So we have one question regarding. So there was recent work with collaboration to Ruby Gems, I guess, and what are the plans ahead for both Bundler and Ruby Gems, as well as what all different things that you see could be in near future for Bundler?
I guess like I previously mentioned, the first thing is the first priority is the new index format. I think that is where it's at, and yeah, and now that I remember it, after that it's the release of Bundler 2.0. So with Bundler 1.0, what we have done with each of our releases to support, we have been compatible completely, like 100% backward compatible. So we haven't been able to incorporate large amounts of features which we are planning to do it in Bundler 2.0. So I think that's the next priority. And in regards with the integration with the Ruby Gems, I guess the first major integration would be that we Ruby Gems Bundler shared the same resolver. I guess that's where it seems that it will start with. Once that happens, I guess after that it's going to, whatever the collaboration part is, it would be post Bundler 2.0. So that's there are no as far as I know, there are no concrete plans on that, like what else we will do. But it seems like before Bundler 2.0, maybe the resolver will be the one thing that will be shared among that. And yeah, I guess that's about it with the collaboration part. Like, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of stuff. I mean, we all share one kind of Slack room now for both RubyGems.org stuff and Bundler. So like we're kind of, we all see like a bunch of stuff together, and we're all working together on that stuff. But as regards to merging the tools themselves, there probably just hasn't been that much progress, because we're just like, at least with regards to Bundler, we're trying to make that the best experience we can for that. And the new index format that we've been talking about, Ruby Gems will also get that. So when we implement it in Bundler, I'm pretty sure we will also go and work on implementing it inside of Ruby Gems. So everyone, so like even with gem install, you will get those performance improvements there, which will, I think, especially affect countries like India and other places that are kind of farther away from USCs and things like that.
Sure.
Right. So we have taken a lot of. I've taken a lot of time. I'll just wrap up with your thoughts on visiting India. I think this is the first time that you're visiting, right?
Yeah.
And how was your experience with at RubyConf India, as well as you're traveling currently in Bangalore and Mysore?
Yeah. So it's been a really amazing trip. I actually almost didn't come because I was really sick, basically coming back from the Philippines, and not feeling really well. But I've never been to India, and I really wanted to make it. And I have a track record of basically not canceling on conferences that I have agreed to speak at, and I didn't really want to break that streak. That and like I wanted to come and hang out with Smith, who like we made plans to do stuff basically like after the conference. So the conference was pretty. I enjoyed the conference a lot. Like I think as a whole, the Ruby community is probably one of the best programming communities I've been involved with, having gone to some other conferences and other things. But just like across the board, like is a very friendly community, just worldwide, right? Like even if there's language barriers and other things, like people are really welcoming, and I think the RubyConf India community was like especially so. Like you went to the conference, and I think as a whole, like a lot of people, like some people are shy, but like you definitely had people who would, at least in my case, like who came up and talked to me very specific questions, and definitely was interested and engaged and wanted to kind of like partake and have active discussions, which is really refreshing as a invitee or a speaker, because one of the things you worry about is like things you talk about and other things just like aren't interesting to the community, or people aren't going to get anything out of that. So
Right.
like I got a lot of good reception from the talk I had at RubyConf India, and you know, like with even having spoken like 30 plus times or whatever, like I still get nervous about speaking, because you never know how jokes, well, just like how your jokes and other things and like the material, like how like
Right.
the audience is going to take it, like if people are going to find things funny, if they're going to find them informative and actually useful. So anytime I'm done with the talk, like it's always a really good feeling. And then like hanging out in Bangalore and Mysore for the following week has been a pretty great experience too. So like, I definitely have to thank Smith and Swanan for kind of organizing a bunch of that stuff, like connecting me with Valenzo and C42 and Codemancers in Bangalore. And then also I went to ThoughtWorks today as well, with Rajiv, who I actually just met at RubyConf India. And then Swan actually organized like a whole trip to Mysore, where I actually got to do some sightseeing.
Nice.
Kind of appreciate the kind of more cultural side of India, which was a nice change of pace from just hanging out in people's offices. But I got to hang out with the Quinix guys, and I did a meetup there. But yeah, I mean, I've been blown away with just like how welcoming and nice and people have been, and like wanting to actually like meet up and do stuff. And like I was kind of worried because basically coming out of the conference, like I booked my stay in Bangalore, but we didn't really have plans in place. So I was kind of worried that I was just going to hang out in Smith's apartment for the week and kind of just hack on stuff. But it was nice to be able to actually just meet people in the community and engage in real conversations. Like for instance, I got to pair with the Codemancer guys on RBKit, so that was really cool to kind of like give them feedback and stuff on that. And like I'm really excited to see like where that project's going to go. I think it's a promising project. And it's probably one of the most interesting things that I've seen come out of like the Indian Ruby open source community. That's like a really prominent, impactful thing. So I'm excited to see what they do with that.
Awesome. Right. So we have out of time. But I once again thanks both of you for making time. I think it's getting pretty late right now. Also, thanks again for Terence for joining us on the short trip.
Yeah, I
and
mean, thanks for
hope you
having
have
on the show.
I hope you have a safe flight.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Thanks again, Smith and Terence.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.